to show you a sample here of a thought process. Now, we mentioned kind of working in threes, and that at least can establish a beginning, a middle, and an end. Now that beginning, middle, and end could be someone walking into the shot and then stopping and making an expression, or it could be three separate shots in which a character is moving towards something or doing something. It could be three panels of someone delivering their dialogue. And so they might have an action here, then they look up, and then they sort of do another gesture. So that's three. Now, that's not to say that everything you would ever do is always in three, but it's a good place to kind of start as a benchmark for the possibility of working in continuity. So I thought I would kind of show you something here. And I'm going to go ahead and read beat one as we listen to music from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which I think is appropriate here. So beat one, I've got Carmen strides out onto Main Street and stares down the outlaw Dirty Steve McFarnsworth. Beat two is the interior saloon, where Percy watches the standoff from inside the saloon and faints from nervousness. So that's a lot of information to kind of encapsulate in a sequence of images. And if you look here, and by the way, we're working in Storyboard Pro, and these two thumbnail drawings, and these are essentially very, very quick thumbnail drawings, signify beats one and beats two. Now, Carmen is our character in the far deep space, and Dirty Steve here is in the foreground, our wonderful little cowboy shot with the camera on the ground. And then we have an interior shot with Percy fainting away here. And then we've got our two characters, Dirty Steve and Carmen, out here outside of the saloon. And this is about as detailed as a thumbnail as I would ever do. Very, very quick and off the cuff. So usually I'd have a script page and I'd be working and kind of thumbnailing down the side of the page. And for me, this is as much, maybe even more. This is more tone than I would even do on a script page. But I think it works. It's functional, more functional here. If I were to click on these two bottom panels here, you'll note that these are individual scenes. And by scenes or shots, rather, you'll note that this is encapsulated within one box. If I were to duplicate this, you would see that now it's encapsulated, that's two panels, panels 1 of 2 and 2 of 2, and you'll notice the same shot. And if I were to go to this one, I could do the same thing, duplicate, and now we have shot 30, 3-0, and we have panels 1 of 2 and panels 2 of 2. So this might help you as you start to use Storyboard Pro and think, well, geez, how should I approach these different shots that I'm going to create? Sometimes people start using Storyboard Pro and they just sort of almost straight ahead animate it, and they just sort of like panel, 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 and they all do it within the same shot. And the minute they do any kind of camera moves later on down the road, everything gets jacked up pretty badly. So just wanted to kind of show you this process again. And all I did to do that was to right click, go to duplicate panel, click it, and now we have a third one. So there's that. I'm going to go ahead and delete these, and you can do that by going to right click, and we're going to delete the panels that we have selected. Click on that, right click, and delete panel. Something else that what you're seeing here is based on the thumbnails you saw. These are what I would call rough or even semi-clean versions of the thumbnails. And just a quick note for those of you unfamiliar with Storyboard Pro, if you want to move back and forth between panels, you would use the F key or the A key. The F key moves forward, and the A key moves backwards, like so. Also, you'll note down here this little button that says Camera Mask. And then the Camera Mask allows you to hide all of this extra information. And it shows you what you would be seeing once you export this to either PDF or to a movie. Say you're making an animatic out of it. So I like to work both ways when I'm working. I like to kind of draw outside so that I can create my background. So if I need to move the camera around, if I were to click on camera, I needed to move this around to different areas, I can do that because I have enough background. I'll Command Z it so I don't lose my framing there. But then I also like to double check my composition, and the quickest way to double check my composition is to go back down to the Camera Mask and click on it. And now I can see, yeah, this is kind of what I like. So having all that background will help you later on when you need to do a camera move and you don't want to draw the background a billion times. So you have everything that you need. But again, this is an example of something that's more tied down. It's rough, but it's a little more tied down than the thumbnail. And obviously there's some tone to that. In a first pass, I would not do tone. It just takes a bit more time than necessary for the director to understand what you're trying to do. It's helpful, but really when you might make a bunch of changes and you've got 900 panels for an 11-minute episode of something, you don't want to put tone in there and end up changing things or having to rip all that work away. So again, these are examples of something that is a bit more tied down. So now we're moving from this idea of beats 1 and beats 2 from their thumbnail form. Obviously there's some information missing. How did Carmen get out to the road? The beat says that Carmen strides out onto Main Street and stares down the outlaw dirty Steve McFarnsworth. But she's already out here. So in order to really put continuity to Carmen walking out, we're probably going to need more shots and more movement within a shot. So let's try that, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and put a shot in front of this, probably a couple, but we'll start with one. So I'll go with New Scene. And just so I have it near me, I'm going to go ahead and copy this information into my new panel just so I can see it. The nice thing about Storyboard Pro 2 is when I select both of my layers, if I then use the lasso tool, which can be found, which is the arrow key actually, the black arrow key, when I hold Shift, it will select everything in both of those panels, which is really great. So let's try that again. Both of these panels are selected. I'm going to hold Shift and draw my lasso around all of that information. If I hit Command C and copy it, go to my new scene, and I'll slide this over, and I'm just going to paste this into layer A. And now you can see it pastes both layers of information. By the way, this is vector-based information that we have, so it means I can enlarge this pretty well without losing any detail. We have a bitmap function here that we could talk about at a later date, but the nice thing about Storyboard Pro 7 and up is that the tools, the drawing tools in the vector mode are a lot better, and I actually modified one of their existing ones to get that look, but the one they have is pretty close. Command Z, shrink that back down. So I'm going to slide this over here because I know that this is my target. Actually, let's slide it over here. So I want to get Carmen as she strides out onto Main Street. So there's a couple things that I'm going to try. It's my wife. She's quite fun. So, actually, maybe that was my son. Anywho, I'm going to go ahead and sketch. So let's just say we start Carmen out, and by the way, this is the pen tool. And I click on it, it opens me up, and I have tool properties that I can click on. Panel if I have a script, but we'll talk about that later. Tool properties showing my tools, brush tools, and my color. I go down to my pre-created brush here. Now I'm going to go to black. So let's just say Carmen comes out of somewhere. Maybe she comes out of another saloon. So I'm just going to thumbnail this in very, very quickly. And I'm going to give her a little bit of hero-ness to the shot. I'm going to give myself a grid, drop that opacity down, like so. And I'm going to give me a little bit of a doorway. I'm going to be really chunky with this brush, chunkier than I typically am, but that's probably a good thing for me. And I want this to kind of feel, and again, this is really me sort of thumbing this out a bit. It's not pretty. I'm not worrying about it being pretty right now, but I do want to capture the shot. So let's look at that. That's good enough for now. It's not pretty, but it's good enough for now. I could put a wall back there, but that's a little deep in the space. Okay, so this is enough. Maybe I put Carmen in here about to walk out. And I can click, if you wanted to zoom in, you click 1 and 2. 2 will zoom in, 1 will zoom back out. So I'm just going to give us our Carmen here. And again, this is really me just sort of thumbnailing this out. Not pretty. This is just to sort of give me an idea of how I might want to handle that shot. So that's a thumbnail of this. Eventually I'll get her out the door, but let's do our next shot leading up to this. We'll make a new scene. And let's try, maybe we do a reverse of this shot, but a little further out. So maybe I'm going to put those swinging doors in. Actually, let's go ahead and draw our horizon. Shift will constrain it, very similarly to Photoshop. I like this whistling. Whistling's fun. Drop the opacity down and make a new layer. If we come down to here, those multicolors show us that it's a vector layer. So I click on that and it produces a new layer for us. Now I'll draw on that layer. Let's draw this in, and now we're crossing the street and these swinging doors in the foreground, so I'm going to probably do my best to put some of our buildings on the opposite side of the street here. And again, there's nothing pretty here, nothing fancy at this juncture. Although I am trying to kind of offset some things so that it doesn't, so it makes the composition a little better to look at. A little wild, wild west town here. Apparently there's a lot of saloons and drugstores and whatnot. I could put General store. It's a general store with a lot of hooch. I love this music from The Good and the Bad and the Ugly. If I'm not mistaken, this is a scene where our protagonist is kind of walking along with one of the other protagonists who's he's in cahoots with, but actually the guy's working against him. They're walking through a Civil War encampment. Sergio Leone took a few liberties with the history of America, as this apparently takes place in Texas, but there was not that many battles in Texas in the Civil War. But that does not detract from an otherwise very good movie. All right. I'm going to paste this background onto a different layer because I want to be able to knock that back in its opacity. So I tend to think of, even in this stage of thumbnailing, since I have Storyboard Pro, I kind of like to build in layers so that I can push things back in space as needed. So I'll drop that down to 50%. And let's go ahead and mask that. And I like this. I feel that I probably need to go into the foreground and maybe create another horse post. I'm going to try to avoid a tangent as much as possible. I may or may not need that. I may or may not need that. Yeah, having done that, I don't think I need that. So this is what happens, start pushing and pulling things around. The most important thing that needs to happen is that I absolutely need to get Carmen out the door and actually striding out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. A nice little thumbnail here. This is Carmen and the wind is blowing her hair. She's got, you know, Clint Eastwood poncho on as she's striding out. And again, this is very, very rough, very thumbnail. It's just enough to suggest what we need to here. And because I want to make sure that foreground reads, I may in fact go in and give us just a little tone to kind of separate these, separate our doors out just a bit. I'm going to put that on a different layer, new vector layer, and I can make that larger. Close enough. Now, that's 3 shots. Now, that will get us, without moving Carmen, that will actually get us out to the center. That's 3 shots to do that, but we don't see the movement. We still don't see movement. It's just, here's a panel, here's a panel, here's a panel. She kind of leaps forward quite a bit. So within the scope of these 3 shots, we are now going to add a few panels within each of these shots. And you'll see how the continuity really begins to come together here. Let's go back to our shot. Something I want to show you while we're doing that is I am adding shots here and there. And you'll see the numbers here are changing and they seem a little odd. What I like to do after I get all of my shots together, and I have stopped dropping in new scenes here or there, is I like to rename them. So I'm going to go back to the first one. If I go to Storyboard, up here, click on it, and come down to Rename Scene. Click on that. And right now it says I would be renaming the current scene only. I want to rename them all with the structure in tens. So current name is 110, new name is 10. If I click on the current scene only, I want to renumber the scenes, all of them. Now you'll see current, the new name, what was 15, or this shot here, will become 20. So that's a way of kind of helping us kind of keep things organized. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Hit OK. And now you can see that my shot that was 15 is shot 20, and now we have shot 30, shot 40, shot 50. And you can do that by ones if you really want to. Each studio has their own naming convention. It might be 001, 0010, 0020. It just depends, but that's how you would rename it. Okay, going back to shot 20 now. We don't want to necessarily start Carmen here. What if, and let me change there we go. I would have a tendency to want to just have an establishing shot without a character in it. Now this is a tighter establishing shot, but that's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and take Carmen out of that shot, and I'm going to right-click, duplicate panel, and since I've already drawn Carmen, I'm going to make it seem like she's moving forward. Click on that by shrinking her down as if somehow she's entering the scene. Shift, by the way, will scale it perfectly. If you don't use Shift, when you grab that end, it will do a lot of this jazz to it. So I want to make sure that you hit Shift and drag, and that will constrain it. So now that we have Carmen here, I'm going to slide her. I'm going to drag that layer down and slide her back. And I'm going to use the cutter tool by going up to the black arrow where we have select color and then the cutter. Grab the cutter. And I'm just going to cut away here. And when it's green, you know it's cutting. It's not like you've selected the whole thing. It's green, it's telling you you just selected what you need to. Delete. Cut away, delete. And I'm going to go in and kind of draw her body coming towards us. Might if we use black. There we go. And again, this is just a thumbnail. So she's out, and she's coming into the shot. And I made a critical error because I messed with Carmen and cut her. Fortunately, I drew her in the very first panel, so I can hit duplicate. Now I can grab this, and you'll note I can slide it over, and now I'm moving that panel that I just duplicated. I can click back on the layer, and now we have Carmen in our shot where we see her face. So boink, boink, boink. And then she's a little large in that shot too. So now I can, again, select her, scale her back down. And for the sake of how tight that is, I'm going to grab the camera over here. I can grab the edge. If we zoom in, you can see I have these little this black frame. There it is. Camera mask. And grab it and pull. And that feels better. In some cases, I might have stayed that tight and maybe done a camera move that would kind of pull out, or we would say truck out, as she comes to the camera. I will sometimes do that just to kind of keep movement in the scene, because I like, just as for my personal taste, I like to feel like there's a subtle movement to a shot until I need it to be absolutely still. But I've worked on productions where they would say, look, just don't move the camera that much. If you don't need to move it, don't move it. And like any other cut or edit, you only make a camera move when you need to reveal new information. In this case, I was trying to reveal more space for Carmen to move. And that's an editorial choice. But for now, we're just going to keep it wide, and I might just refield that a little bit so that composition feels better. And now let's take a look at it. Okay, so that's 3 panels in just this one shot, but she's still not out. So in this case, I'm probably going to need a couple of more panels, and I'll show you what I'm going to do, because I need to open those panels. I need to open the doors actually. So this is where I will drop the opacity. Some people like to use onion skin. I don't typically use it. I just drop the opacity and draw over. It's not a hard and fast. So, and again, this is just a very quick thumbnail. Let's open those. And probably, let's slide that over so it's more of a hinge. There we go. Now I'm going to delete that layer. So, well, let's not delete that layer. Let's go ahead and select those doors on that layer. Delete, they're gone. Select, delete, it's gone. Probably need to add a bit more information into that door frame. And I'm going to go ahead and move Carmen out through the door. Maybe enlarge her just a little bit as if she's coming forward. But her hands aren't there anymore. We got to do a little bit of redrawing. So let's go ahead and do that. Again, not as worried about the prettiness of drawings in the thumbnail stages here. But now we get a full look at Carmen. I'll put fingers up there. She is striding through the doors. Poncho on, determined look, and just because I actually like the Carmen character that I'm coming up with, maybe I'll give her just a little, make it just a little more detailed than I had her. Close enough. Let's get her body in there. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I suppose you think you're probably going to know what's going to happen next. We'll make a new panel, duplicate by right-clicking and then clicking on it. And I'll select her. And I'll make her a little bit larger and move her over. Drop those arms. And bring that poncho back. And I'll probably just go ahead and in this case maybe close the doors behind her. And I'll grab these doors back from the original panel. And I can copy these by layers. I can get right click and I can say copy selected layers. Click on it, go back up to here, and I will say paste the layer. And now we have that pasted, but I'm going to drop the opacity because I want to be able to see Carmen through there. And now we have it. Boom, 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 boom. Something else that I'll show you really quick that you wouldn't necessarily have to do, but because it's a little messy in there, I'm going to do a real quick fill. How to fill this. So notice that I'm kind of closing off these areas of the drawing a little bit. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I can right click, go down to generate auto matte. And let's go with 200 for the radius, just guessing here. And that's going to fill a layer. It's going to create a matte layer underneath that's going to constrain to the shape of the previous drawn layer. And depending on if you have things closed or not closed, we'll see how accurate we are with my guess here, but it'll be white underneath. I'm gonna hit OK. And there it filled it. But it didn't fill the drawing, it created a matte layer underneath. Some people like to fill the drawing. I prefer to keep a matte layer underneath. And that's what we have. Boom, boom, boom. It's timed pretty well with the music by complete accident, but it works too. Dun, 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 dun. Right? So, continuity-wise, we got her walking out the door, but she's pretty far away from those swinging doors, so how did she get there? So, let's move on to our next shot, and we're going to, what we would call, hook this up. And because we're trying to make it feel like she's moving from the previous shot, we're going to need to duplicate this. Duplicate. And I'm going to try and bring her back a little bit closer to where she just is exiting. Now, there's a couple things that I could do. I could let her completely exit out of this frame, or I could cut on action. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I'm going to cut on action, meaning she's still moving. And because that will give more movement to the scene. I'm going to go ahead and select her. Kind of bring her much closer to our frame here. And slide her this layer underneath. And I might, and this is where I start getting in the tall weeds of things, and you're seeing more than 3, but that's okay. It at least gives you an idea of how I'm thinking. So I'm going to make it so that her poncho has not started to blow yet. And maybe her hair hasn't started to blow yet. And I think I'm going to slide her over a bit here. Center that better. And then right-click, duplicate. And we'll shrink her as she's now walking further and further away. And now I can start to kind of just, again, begin to blow that hair just a little bit and lift that poncho. Now we're getting into the fun part of this. And I lost my music, so it should come back in a little bit. There we go. See, it's looking good now, even as a rough. So let's look at this now in continuity all the way through to that shot. Now she's standing still, so clearly she hasn't stopped walking from the previous shot. So in this shot, what are we going to have to do? We're going to have to add in some extra panels here where she's walking so that it kind of ties together. So we'll click on our shot 4, I'm going to hit duplicate. And in our first version of that shot, she should not be there yet. So that means I'm going to have to turn off the shadow too, or at least delete it. Then again, you're seeing me draw really, really fast. These aren't very pretty, but they're clear. And probably the most important thing that we can consider is clarity. Again, we'll talk about something called eye trace in the coming weeks as well. But when I mean eye trace, I'm trying to keep my eye positioned in the same spot on the screen. So that means right about there, I can kind of have Carmen start to walk out. And let's see, that's about the scale. Probably should zoom in a bit. Doesn't hurt to zoom in, because that's pretty ugly. Not gonna lie. Let's try this one more time. And just so I have some scale reference. Striding out. Let's make sure that gun is there. Put the poncho. And again, just a thumbnail. Nothing has to be perfect at this stage. I would come back and very much tie this down, obviously, for final cleanup. And somehow she magically got from here to there, so probably need at least one more walking panel to make that read more effectively. And I'll zoom in, and I like this kind of effect. I'll just select her and hit Shift, slide her over to constrain it. You'll see the little blue line kind of constrains it. And of course, the minute I snapped off of it, there we go. Now, I will very much change the legs so that it actually feels like she's walking. And that back, the front leg was what was striding first. So we'll alternate those legs. And again, this is just a thumb. Nothing pretty about this at all. Yep, that's all we need. So now when we look at it again, let's go all the way back in the Wayback Machine. That's fun. But who's this guy she's confronting? We probably need to have a better shot of Steve. Dirty Steve. Let's do Dirty Steve. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new shot after this. It shows Dirty Steve. Now I could do Dirty Steve. Yeah, I have a feeling I need to do kind of the requisite wide standoff shot. I think I don't have a choice here. And so what I'm going to do is actually have our characters confront each other. And again, I'm going to kind of, this is really rough. But funnily enough, I did do a nice little sketch of Steve way back here somewhere. Dirty Steve. Which means I'll probably change from that, but again, we're having a little bit of fun with this. There it is. 222, zoom on in, zoom in some more. I'm going to cheat this a little bit, sort of front 3/4 it, even though it's not really a true front 3/4. But this is where when you're sketching stuff out, you really do kind of want to make sure that silhouettes are readable. And if you can get your silhouettes to be readable to someone, even in this kind of a format, so much the better. So much the better. And it's also easier when it comes back to do a cleanup or even tie it down in a more rough state. So I'm just kind of getting in here, maybe adjusting that silhouette just a little bit. And I like that you can just sort of select portions of it and delete. I love this music. I really do. And I would probably hunch him down a bit more. I'll probably, if I were doing this, kind of like this kind of gesture a bit more. Something else too, as you guys are working, you're seeing this sort of auto save. So that you don't crash and burn and lose a bunch of stuff. To do that, you would go under Storyboard Pro and you would go to Preferences, click on it, and go to Advanced across the top of this. Advanced, and you'll go Auto Save right there. Now I have it auto save every 10 minutes, which is as much as you can, as fast as you can do it. If it were up to me, I'd do it every 5 minutes. They don't do it. So I do it every 10 minutes. Click OK, and now it will save every 10 minutes. Which is good, because you never know when there'll be a power outage, especially now when the weather is really funky. You know, I'm probably just going to go with this and shrink it down. And just use it. Little spurs. Jingle, jangle, jingle. I like that so much better. So much better. And I'll probably even shrink them down more, because technically I've established in the first thumbnail that I did that they were a lot further apart than they currently are. So I know I'm going to have to fix that. And drop that arm. Close enough. Yeah, I'm going to make her a little taller. This is what we call character designing on the fly. And I'm actually going to shrink them because now I have more space to play with. And so now that seems really awkward for the framing on that. I can grab that and slide that a bit. There. Now that feels better. In order to make that eye trace work and not be quite so jarring, I'm going to kind of, this is called creating my layout on the fly. Now I might make that post. Let's see what happens if I make this post in the foreground here. This might not work, but you know, we're going to try it. Create some buildings back here. Apparently there's another general store. And again, this is very, very rough, and I really don't care. Does it read? Question is, does it read? Is it clear enough to read? If I had to show this to a supervisor or a director, do they know what the heck the shot's trying to do? And if they don't, then we've got what we like to call a problem. Yeah, got a problem there. And let's make a new layer. Go down here, boom. Command V, paste. Now let's look at this in context. That might be a little distracting. Might just be a little distracting. Let me slide her over just a bit. So I tried to put something in the foreground, and you know what? It was a little distracting. But I think I might put something else in the foreground. Like, say, maybe a barrel. I think I might be able to get away with a barrel. Let's try that. And of course, I'm going to slide her over because I don't want her looking like she's standing on a barrel, because that's going to be awkward. And again, these are some of the considerations. Since I did not make a thumbnail of this, I'm just sort of making this up as I go. And that's okay, because that actually happens. Sometimes you're like, I can be really extensive with the thumbnails on paper on the script page, and then when it comes right down to it, I discover, you know, I actually need more shots. Sometimes I'll go, you know, that was a little too much. That's a little busy. You don't need that many shots. You know, collapse that information in, you know. But sometimes, probably more often than not, I actually need to do a little bit more work. Slide up. It's getting there. It's getting there. And if I really wanted to, I could actually do this where I'm going to add a panel and I'm going to animate, quote unquote, animate the poncho and the hair a little bit blowing. And again, not pretty, but it gets the job done. And then I can just copy Carmen, actually just duplicate that layer, actually just, or to panel, duplicate the panel like that, slide it over, and there's another example of R3. Okay, we'll zoom back out, and now this is what we have. And I could do it a couple more times if I really wanted to play the timing out, but I think for now this will be what we do. And now I think I'll do that image of Steve. I'm going to give it an upshot here. Drop that down. Make a new layer. And I like opening it up here because I could end up getting a little too cramped if I'm not careful. Now this is a case where I'm going to draw Steve, and then do the background. Most of the time I do backgrounds first, but when I get medium close-ups, then I kind of really want to address, you know, my character first. And I have a tendency to always pitch them looking too far this way, so I'm going to bring him a little closer. So that's just one of my tendencies, and most board artists have their tendencies when they go, they usually do stuff a certain way, and they go, crap, why do I always do that? And so that's one of my tendencies that I notice that I do. So I'm kind of going into autocorrect mode. Bags around the eyes. I mean, bags. This guy's like hard drinking, man. If I could give him a red nose, I would. And I've got our mustache here. A little growl here. Drop those eyebrows just a bit more. Sweaty, dirty. Trying to match up that hunch from the other shot. And you can see now, this is why it's like I like to draw it bigger, because this gives me an opportunity to kind of do a little bit more at the body. Sometimes if I don't do the full body within the shot, it feels really cramped. It doesn't feel like I actually have the body mass proper, you know. And there's that autosave. And you can't go wrong getting the full gesture in. If you're doing it like that, it's not going to take you forever and a day to do it. So I figure, why the heck not? Let's get that silhouette so that gun reads. Now, we might not see the gun in this shot, but, you know, if the director was like, hey, you know, I think we really need to see that gun, then I would have it. I wouldn't have to like add to the drawing in the rough. It would already be there. And that, of course, at the end saves you more work later on when you need to tie it down. My hand's a little clipped, so this is a moment where I go, how much do I need to see? That's probably how I would frame that. But if I wanted more, guess what I have the option to do? Enlarge that, and it gives us more. I might actually move him in these previous shots so that his position in the frame looks better. And let's go ahead and copy him. Hit A to move backwards. Delete, copy V, or Command V. And we'll do it back in this one too. Now I will say that there's a way, and I don't know it off the top of my head, there's actually a way to automate that if all your layers are named the same. There's a way to do that, and I do not know it, but it's possible. That looks so much better now. Someone's irritated upstairs. So here we go. And I could really flesh this out. You know, maybe his hand does a little bit of a thing where he's, you know, getting real itchy with his trigger finger. You know, in which case I could just do an alternation of the fingers. Draw on another layer. It's kind of like animating in a way. And again, this is really rough. You know, I would have more articulation when I tie it down. But I think at the very least, it's enough. Again, it's enough to show a director. Duplicate the first one, and we will slide it here, and you'll see what happens. And I'll probably go ahead and duplicate that second one so we can get more tangle. And again, it is a timing thing. You know, You could do more, you could do less. And now I noticed since I drew him, I completely forgot to put in my background. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll open up our shot again, our panel. Again, very rough. Very rough, no reference, but you know what? Close enough. And I'm going to drop the opacity on that because I think maybe those buildings are too big. I think that my original idea let's just draw the buildings like this so that they're a little bit farther away. Maybe I got a building back here that's maybe a little bit taller. I can live with that. I can live with that. I can sort of live with that. Drop that to 50%. And just because I want to, I will copy it. Paste. Paste. And of course, once we show Dirty Steve, we kind of gotta show Carmen now. New scene. And I'm going to have her face, now that we've established, we've talked about screen direction in the past, I'm going to make this a little even more of a, really push the hero shot a little bit more. And I think I'm actually going to be a little tighter on her. She looks like she's as sad as this music is. I'm about to say, I really like this music, but somehow subconsciously I end up kind of losing the mood. So you correct a little bit of the personality here. More steely-eyed. I like that lip. I don't want her to say anything yet. That's better. And again, give us a little bit more information to deal with. Quickly thumb this out, a little shadow under the neck here. And again, this is just down and dirty. It's not hyper pretty, not the most beautiful drawings I've ever done in my life. Probably some of the worst drawings I've ever done in my life. Well, not that bad. And yeah, now, see, this is a more ago. It's not quite what I wanted. So I'm going to tighten that a little bit. And maybe I can turn this That's what I feel like I need to do. Let's turn on a little bit more. My kids are having fun in the other room. That actually sounds kind of funny with this music going on, huh? Now, I could even go, so you see me kind of working these threes now, even within the scene. I wanted to narrow her eyes a bit. So in this duplicated panel, I'm going to go ahead and narrow her eyes. Real steely, you know what I mean? Let's bring these down just a little bit. Grab them, shift them down. And here, I'm actually going to squeeze these in. I'm going to grab it in the middle, and because I'm not going to hold the shift key, I can squeeze these. And that's what you get, like that. Especially if I move down that brow properly. Yeah, I think that now I can cut in. Actually, I was going to say cut inside, but I think I need to do an establishing shot of Percy back in there. But let's look at this. Boom. Yep, good enough. Good enough. But the funny thing is, how do we get from here to Percy? That doesn't really work, does it? Like, where did this guy come from? We never established him. So what we're probably going to have to do is we'll make a new scene. And I'm going to go and let's just kind of establish this. It's bizarre. Bizarre happy music. Let's just have this window kind of like that. And we'll go ahead and I think that post would have been out here somewhere. But let's put the railing for that post. And again, we're not being overly pretty right now. We're just trying to establish that there's some guy looking out a saloon window. Let's try to spell saloon right if we could. If we could. And I might widen this. So that's what happens. I sometimes look at things and I go, I should probably widen that just a little bit. Now I wonder, does this actually work for us? Maybe it's more effective to actually show the slats. Probably more effective to show the slats of the side of the. Probably shouldn't have done that. Close enough because I know it's getting a little long on time here. So I'll start that, and let's make a duplicate of that, and now I'll sort of raise Percy up in here. His head's going to come up here, and he's going to be like, holy moly. Golly gee, what are we gonna do? This seems like this is all gonna end very, very badly for everyone. He's putting his finger in his mouth. dear. Oh, jeez. Doesn't quite look like a finger, but one of those deals. The more I futz with that, the worse it gets. Couldn't hurt to put a few people back in the background too. At least to suggest there's other people inside the bar. And probably what I need to do is I'll paste the other people into that shot. Now, see how that works? Now it looks like Percy came up and popped and he's looking now. That feels better. So there's a shot in between. And actually, I put them in the wrong space, so I can grab these and let's just move these in between. Notice that these are in between those two scenes, shots. Plunk them in. There we go. And now we have to start him fainting. He's in the middle of a feint, and we don't want him to be in the middle of a feint. We want him to faint. So I will go ahead and just draw him kind of the reverse angle behind. So let's and he's wearing some kind of like shade that an accountant would have used or something. I don't know. This is one of those moments you're like, I should probably have done more research costuming wise. But this was such an impromptu, off-the-cuff sort of deal. There's sideburn mutton chops. And I'm going to put that finger back in the mouth, or at least suggest it. And let's go ahead and we'll fill him with whatever color I had there in this panel. And to do that, I can hit the eyedropper down here and go over that color, select it, there it shows up, there it is. Come back to this one, and with this click, now I'm going to go ahead and generate automat, and it's going to be white, but that's not a problem. Keep both. Might help if I select that layer. Now we'll do it. Generate automat. Okay, there it is. Now I'll just go ahead and select that and tap on the color that I dropped, and then fill it. Or just click on it and it will automatically fill. And now, 1, 2, I'm going to add this third panel. We'll duplicate it. And I'm going to go ahead and let Percy fall out of frame. Let's just see what happens if I just turn the layer off. Turn those layers off. I would probably be inclined to add one more pose into there. Complete the arc. Some weird amorphous body shape, but that's okay. Generate automat. Fill with whatever I think that color was, which is that. Yep, same one. He was probably wearing some pants. I'll probably should put some pants on him in this drawing. And some buttons there. Now Now I can duplicate that one more time. And now we can turn off the layers. There you have it. Oh dear. Oh dear, dear, dear. Oh my. Ugh. And that's how to kind of work from thumbnail to kind of a comprehensive rough, just based on 2 beats. Now I added a lot to this and could probably add more to it, but I think starting out, if you're just starting out and doing this, you may start with going, maybe I need 3 shots to get to hooking up between these 2 beats. Maybe I need, maybe you start out with just this shot and walk her out and you land her. I chose to do it a little bit differently, and your 3 could have been 1, 2, 3, cut. I chose to kind of start here and walk her through. So when you're working, just note that when you're going from those beats, you're going to need some connective tissue to make it move from beat board to continuity board. Okay? Hopefully this helps you out. My name is Lincoln Adams, and most of you know who I am, but for those of you who don't, and when I say most, I mean students, but for those of you who know and you see this, that's who I am. Take care.